early 20th century, Indus Valley, Pakistan. During excavations of the ancient Indian city of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists found something intriguing: melted bricks. According to the experts, these marks on the building materials could only have been formed under the influence of an incredibly high temperature. Moreover, these melted traces seem to be arranged as if the heat originated from the center and spread outward through the city. Among the ruins, archaeologists found over 40 skeletons whose radiation levels exceeded the norm by 50 times. But what in the world happened to this advanced city 4,000 years ago? According to researcher David Davenport, Mohenjo-Daro was wiped out by a nuclear bomb. Davenport suggests this catastrophe resulted from a war between ancient, highly developed civilizations. And he boldly claims that humans aren't the only technologically advanced beings who have inhabited our Earth. Indeed, archaeological discoveries worldwide boggle the mind. Ancient humans couldn't have created all of this with primitive tools. What if, thousands of years ago, our planet was home to much more intelligent creatures than us? In this video, we'll delve into the top-known ancient civilizations and try to find out if technologically advanced beings existed on Earth before humans came into the picture. It's time to separate the myths from the reality. Let's assume that advanced civilizations inhabited our planet thousands of years ago. But if so, some artifacts or ancient technologies should be left behind, don't you think? Yet, there are none. Or is there evidence after all? To find out, we might need to turn to the reptilians, specifically the Silurian hypothesis. It's a thought experiment named after the intelligent reptilian species from the British sci-fi series Doctor Who. The Silurian hypothesis suggests that we should look for evidence of ancient civilizations in the geological record of our planet. You see, over its roughly 4.5 billion year history, Earth has survived tectonic plate movements, volcanic activity, erosion, and numerous meteorite impacts. Researcher Alan Wiseman, in his book titled The World Without Us, explains that if pre-human civilizations had technologies similar to ours, much of it would have simply disappeared. And any proof of their existence would have been erased by millions or billions of years of geological activity. Even plastic waste breaks down under the influence of ultraviolet radiation and bacteria. This process takes anywhere from 6 months to 700 years, which is quite quick on a planetary scale. Large structures don't fare much better. After several million years of erosion from wind and rain, Mount Rushmore, for instance, would look just like any other mountain. Even relatively recent advanced civilizations in pre-Columbian America constructed most of their buildings from organic materials like wood. That's why finding their remnants today is such a challenge. However, geologist Jan Salazevich from the University of Leicester in England insists that if there are traces of ancient civilizations, we should be looking not on the Earth's surface, but much deeper, in layers that modern archaeologists cannot reach. But it seems that one such discovery might have been made by scientists back in the early 20th century. April 5th, 1909, the United States. The Phoenix Gazette ran a story by researcher Kincaid and Professor Jordan from the Smithsonian Institution about an astonishing archaeological discovery. It told of how Kincaid, while exploring the Grand Canyon, ran across a passage within the cliffs that led to an intricate network of tunnels. And these tunnels were not typical natural formations. They were geometrically precise and meticulously designed corridors, forming a vast labyrinth. The tunnels led to chambers filled with all sorts of treasures. Some of them were dated back to 4,000 years ago. Among the findings were artifacts resembling Indian sculptures, figures resembling Buddha, tablets with peculiar hieroglyphs, and various objects made of iron and bronze. How did all of these items end up in the same cave? Some researchers argue that this is evidence that ancient people from different civilizations crossed the ocean long before Christopher Columbus. The cave discovered by Kincaid might have been a place where representatives of ancient cultures could have met and exchanged knowledge. Although both Kincaid and Professor Jordan leaned toward the idea that the underground city was the home of an even older civilization. The cave featured inscriptions on the walls, ritual vessels, and tablets that scientists never managed to decipher. The civilization's script seemed to resemble a mix of petroglyphs found in southern Arizona and Egyptian hieroglyphs. The weirdest thing about this story is that such a sensational scientific discovery was only covered in a single article in a local newspaper. There was no mention of it anywhere else, ever. What's more, even after publication, no one except for Kincaid managed to locate the cave's entrance. Upon learning of this news, researchers wasted no time reaching out to the Smithsonian Institution, hoping to get some answers. The response they got was a shocker. The Smithsonian claimed they had no knowledge of this find, and Professor Jordan, the guy Kincaid supposedly handed all his research to, had never been on their payroll. Now, does this mean we should label the Grand Canyon Citadel as a hoax? Well, hold your horses. There's more to the story. The Smithsonian statements might not be exactly true. Supporters of this theory dug up some documents from the institution itself that mentioned a collaboration with Professor Jordan. When archaeology buffs tried to hunt down the passage to the cave in the specified Grand Canyon area, they were simply denied entry. The thing is, the Grand Canyon's got roughly 1,000 caves, but guess what? Only one of them is open to visitors. The rest are always off limits. To make matters more interesting, you're not allowed to fly helicopters or send drones up over the canyon. They can't go below 90 meters above the ground, even outside the so-called forbidden zone. And let's face it, checking out the cave entrance from the air would be much easier. Conspiracy theorists are convinced that the American scientific community, in cahoots with the government, covered their tracks to keep the truth under wraps. A truth that might be quite different from the official narrative. Even researchers of Native American folklore seem to agree with this. In Native American legends, ancient civilizations are often mentioned, including a race of gods who lived in the Americas before the indigenous tribes arrived. Now, until we find that cave entrance, we might as well label the Grand Canyon civilization as classified in our list of mysterious cultures. But what if we actually need to go deeper underground, into the planet's bowels? And why do we know so little about relevant studies? In 1692, English geophysicist Edmund Halley floated the idea that Earth consists of a hollow shell about 800 kilometers thick, with two concentric inner shells and an inner core. According to him, atmospheres separate these shells, each with its own magnetic poles. Moreover, the outer and inner spheres rotate at different speeds. But most importantly, there's a whole world inside our Earth. Over time, it was theorized that this world is populated by a powerful civilization called Agartha. Legends about Agartha exist in many cultures across the world. Agartha's capital was believed to be a city of gods. Judging by the legends, its citizens had scientific knowledge and expertise far surpassing that of surface dwellers. If you ask me, it sounds pretty far-fetched. It's no wonder the scientific community didn't take this idea seriously. So let's categorize the theory of the highly advanced underground folk as insufficient evidence. After all, for now, we're dealing with mere speculations. But what about facts? In 1913, Marshall Gardner wrote a book called A Journey to the Earth's Interior. In it, he suggested that the Earth's core is actually a miniature sun inside the hollow planet. According to his theory, the inner world is connected to the surface through openings at the north and south poles, cleverly concealed beneath ice layers. But wait, if Earth were truly hollow inside, someone would have found an entrance by now, don't you think? Well, it seems like someone might have. Norwegian Arctic explorer Fridtjof Nansen, in his book The First Crossing of Greenland, says that during his expedition towards the North Pole, he witnessed a red sun in the sky even after it should have already set behind the horizon. He claimed it was a beam of light coming from under the surface. Besides, Nansen tried to argue that the northern lights are also generated by this inner sun of our planet. But if this entrance to the depths of the Earth is really at the North Pole, as Gardner claimed, why hasn't it been found yet? Haven't we got plenty of technology to check this out? Supporters of the Hollow Earth hypothesis insist that governments are trying to hide this information from us. They believe even satellites deliberately avoid flying over the North and South poles when orbiting the Earth. As another piece of evidence to back this theory, they also point to the lack of clear satellite photos of the poles, as on all the images, you can see nothing except white clouds completely obscuring the view. But then on November 23, 1968, American spacecraft SS-7 took several photos of the South Pole with absolutely no clouds in sight. In these pictures, you can clearly see a massive black hole not far from that area. And mind you, these photos are authentic. They've been verified multiple times. The opening, leading into the depths of Antarctica, is thought to be located between American McMurdo Station, the South Pole, and Russian Vostok Station at approximately 84.4 degrees south latitude and 39 degrees east longitude. By the way, typically on satellite images, the clouds cover precisely the region around these coordinates, 83 degrees south latitude and above. I guess it's safe to place the hypothesis of underground civilizations in the classified category. And yet, could there really be another world inside of our Earth? Not only does a mysterious hole at one of the poles provide evidence, but sometimes nature itself surprises us with puzzling details. In the stomachs of frozen mammoths in the Arctic and Antarctic, experts found tropical plants which don't grow in polar regions. Moreover, the remains were preserved so well that it was as if the animals had died not millions of years ago, but fairly recently, as if they wandered to the surface from an underground world and froze. And while satellite photos and findings in the ice may not sound very convincing, the eyewitness accounts can certainly nudge the theory of an underground civilization into the seems plausible category. What's even more curious, one person claims to have seen the underground world with their own eyes. In 1926, Admiral Richard Byrd embarked on a journey to the North Pole. In his diaries, Byrd tells us that during the flight, his plane began to lose altitude and found itself among mountains he'd never seen before. The pilot feared the worst and had already imagined himself freezing to death amidst the ice and snow. But suddenly, instead of crashing into the ground, Byrd felt the plane entering a small fissure in the ground. A few moments later, he was flying above a dense forest. Upon landing, he saw a city and strange aircraft cruising over it. The locals approached him immediately. Admiral Byrd described that the people living there were very tall and had light hair. The buildings in which they lived were glistening as if made of crystal. The pilot spent several days in this mysterious world before the locals helped him to return to the surface. But in Byrd's diary, found in 1996, most of the memories of that adventure and the Crystal City had been erased. Plus, the official report he submitted to the Geographic Society has very little in common with his own records. I have the impression that the Admiral's superiors ordered him to alter his report, and if they're trying to hide information from us, it could mean that the entrance to Agartha might truly be hidden at the North Pole, especially since humans have never managed to drill through the Earth's crust more than 12 kilometers deep. However, here's another surprise. Scientists claim that we don't need to literally dig to find out what lies in the planet's depths. It's enough to track seismic waves caused by earthquakes. According to researchers, these waves really pass through the center of Earth, reaching the planet's surface on the opposite side of the epicenter. If Earth were hollow, they would behave differently. But I wouldn't rush to dismiss Agartha as legend just yet. In 2022, Professor Hrvoje Tkalčić of the Australian National University announced that he discovered another inner core inside Earth with the help of seismic waves. Once again, I wouldn't jump to conclusions about Agartha, and for now, I'll put it in the insufficient evidence category. But what if Agarthans didn't live under the surface at all? The following story suggests that our world might have been populated by giants. Just listen to this. In 1944, in the Pacific Ocean on the Solomon Islands, fierce battles were raging between the Japanese and American armies. Strangely enough, instead of reports on the battlefield situation, Japanese soldiers were reporting to their commanders about creatures measuring up to 4.5 meters in height, which were attacking armed units. According to eyewitnesses, these giants were strong and cruel, and bullets literally bounced off of them. Maybe the soldiers mistook gorillas for giants. That's very likely in the chaos of war and constant stress. Yet in 2010, pilot and engineer Marius Boyrayan published a book titled Solomon Islands Mysteries, which dispelled some of the skepticism around this story. His work included accounts from local residents, including his wife, who was a native islander. Boyrayan claimed that he personally knew the giants of the island. These beings, he said, had long hair, thick eyebrows, a flat nose, and a wide mouth, and their eyeballs were red in color. Some of them were over 3 meters tall. Marius says that sometimes the giants would kill and abduct people from their homes. Some villages even had to move to other parts of the islands to protect the locals. But considering that science lacks evidence of the giants' existence, for now, the theory about the civilization of giants should be classified as legend on our list. Or do we have such proof? In the 1960s, while traveling around Turkey, American archaeologist Peter Benedict described a mysterious hill, suspecting that some ancient settlement might be hiding right beneath it. It was only in 1994, after local farmers began to complain about the boulders hindering their landworks, that Klaus Schmidt, a researcher from the German Archaeological Institute, began studying this area. And it wasn't in vain. The boulders turned out to be the tops of gigantic T-shaped pillars. In 1995, with the support of the Institute, Schmidt began excavations, which soon became a scientific sensation. That's how Göbekli Tepe was discovered, a colossal temple complex still considered the world's oldest architectural structure. Its age is estimated to be at least 12,000 years. But who built it? According to scientists, the massive monolithic stone elements of the complex were extracted from stone quarries. The largest of them reached 7 meters in height and 3 meters in width and were as heavy as 50 tons. Ancient people couldn't have handled and moved something like this on their own. But unlike the creators of Göbekli Tepe, modern architects and builders not only can't design anything similar, but they also can't explain these construction technologies. According to researchers Andrew Collins and Graham Hancock, the creators of Göbekli Tepe may have been Denisovans, an extinct giant humanoid hybrid known for their high intelligence. According to the theory, they might have been people who survived the Great Flood. They constructed this architectural marvel to preserve and pass down ancient knowledge and culture. Collins and Hancock are convinced that the giant skeletons discovered around the world, which remain unexplained by mainstream archaeology, might belong to the creators of Göbekli Tepe. If we piece together all these facts, we can probably label the theory about giants as seems plausible. After all, in this case, we at least have tangible evidence, an entire temple complex and fragments of skeletons. Meanwhile, researcher Zacharias Sitchin suggests another theory about the creators of Göbekli Tepe. He thinks the complex was built by an ancient race of extraterrestrial beings from the 9th planet Nibiru, the Anunnaki. It might sound too wild to be true, but could it have actually happened? About 6,000 years ago, in the region of Mesopotamia, the Sumerian civilization emerged. According to historical records, it was exceptionally advanced for its time. The Sumerians not only developed one of the earliest known forms of writing, cuneiform script, but also contributed to the development of mathematics and were the first to use hexagons. Even the calendar, as we know it today, was first devised by the Sumerians. They had a complex religious system with numerous gods and myths. Historians believe that the Sumerian mythology contains the first mention of the Anunnaki. Ancient tablets provide some information about their origins. While residing in Mesopotamia, they spoke a language that was obviously different from the native dialect. This means they came from elsewhere. But from where? One legend says that about 450,000 years ago, on the Anunnaki's home planet Nibiru, problems with the atmosphere threatened the complete extinction of all organic life forms. By that time, the Anunnaki civilization, known by the Sumerians as the descendants of the heavens, had advanced enough to travel in space, and their attention was drawn to Earth. Their main purpose was gold mining, which the extraterrestrials wanted to use for technological purposes to protect their deteriorating atmosphere on their home planet. The Anunnaki would send shipments of gold to Nibiru when its trajectory intersected with the orbit of Earth and new expeditions arrived. The Anunnaki needed a large workforce to cope with such massive industrial tasks. According to legend, they decided to create a primitive worker from the simplest beings that roamed around this useful planet. The Anunnaki used their knowledge of genetics and genetic engineering to create humans. As an argument, supporters of this theory point to an ancient Sumerian seal depicting the Tree of Life. They believe this seal represents the human DNA molecule. But how could ancient Sumerians have known about it? I mean, it wasn't until 1953 that scientists James Watson and Francis Crick first proposed a model of the DNA molecule structure in the form of a double helix. This theory might seem way too fanciful because, sometimes a picture of a tree is just a tree, not a stylized image of a Hadron Collider. I believe the Anunnaki civilization rightfully belongs in the legend category on our list. However, in the 20th century, some of the statements found in ancient texts unexpectedly began to make sense. This happened after American scientists Linda Owens and Walter Genger discovered in 1963 that in human cells, apart from just DNA in the form of a double helix that forms chromosomes, there's also another thing existing outside the cell nuclei: mitochondrial DNA. It helps to protect genes from damage during cell replication. On top of that, the mitochondrial DNA of every human being is the same. Scientists believe it might be so because this biological feature was passed down to us from a common ancestor. After researching, they concluded that all humans descended from the so-called mitochondrial Eve, who lived in Africa around 250,000 years ago. If we assume that this ancestor was a representative of the Anunnaki race, perhaps we are all children of gods from the heavens. But of course, without reliable evidence, all of this remains just a guess. The theories we've analyzed may seem fantastic and sometimes downright crazy, but there are certain facts we can neither deny nor explain. Now, I suggest we check which hypothesis has the most evidence and which of them sounds like pure fiction. Göbekli Tepe, the Egyptian pyramids, Machu Picchu. These are just a glimpse of the evidence hinting that people of the distant past had technologies unknown to us in the 21st century. But who were these keepers of knowledge? Let's go back to our list of civilizations. As for the theory that they're entrances to the inner world of our planet at its poles, let's place this in classified. Regarding the story of the mysterious underground world of Agartha, for the time being, it belongs in the insufficient evidence. The giants from the Solomon Islands deserve to be labeled as legend. The story of the enigmatic city of Göbekli Tepe, where excavations are ongoing to this day, falls into the seems plausible category. As for the gods from the heavens, the Anunnaki, I suggest we bend the rules of our list and place this hypothesis at the edge between two verdicts: legend and seems plausible. Don't forget that proponents of this theory have done a really good job assembling a logical set of facts. The very idea of a shared divine DNA sounds believable, not to mention attractive. What do you think? Do you suppose there was indeed a highly advanced race on Earth before humanity? And which of these theories seems the most plausible to you?